Good evening. It's 5:30. Thank you for joining us for tonight's virtual meeting about the Waste Treatment Plant Inspection Plan. For your awareness, this meeting is being recorded. I'm Dana Calloway. I'm with the contractor Hanford Mission Integration Solutions. Tonight's event is part of a 60-day public comment period. It began October 5th and it ends December 4th. Now, in light of our virtual realities, we've converted from the old GoToWebinar platform that you might be familiar with, and we've switched over to Microsoft Teams. It gives us better features. It helps the agencies and you, the audience. Now, while Microsoft Teams isn't new, this is our first crack at it in a DOE meeting, so we ask for your patience. We will be doing our best tonight to adapt to this new system. Now, for those of us joining via Microsoft Teams, we'll use the chat box tonight. Now, if you'll look, everyone's configuration is different, but for most of you, the chat thought box is like a thought bubble in your upper right-hand corner. You can find it next to the hand icon, and we've added a link there to the Hanford.gov events calendar. It's going to contain all of tonight's meeting materials, how to submit your comments, and of course at the end we'll put out an evaluation form so you can tell us how we can improve this meeting system for you. And so then also you have the option to dial in on the phone. If you've called in, you are muted automatically. When you want to unmute, just press *6, and then to return back to mute, hit *6, same command. And if everyone would remember to go back on mute and hit *6, that will keep the background noise down. So please just unmute when you speak and then go back to mute. If you're on the phone only and you need to step away, please don't put the call on hold. You can always just hang up and call back later, and that will save us maybe from some elevator music. So now, as we're going along tonight, you can submit your questions at any time using the chat box. Please let us know if you'd like to read your question or if you'd like to ask it yourself. You can also type your name in the chat box to put yourself in queue to ask your own question over the phone. If you have multiple questions, we ask that you please hold them until the end. We want to go around and make sure every person has at least one chance to ask one question. And then if there are more, we're happy to use the time to answer all of your questions as best we can. So let's get right on over to DOE's Daniel Pearson, our presenter tonight. Thank you, Daniel. Go ahead.
Thanks, Dana. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I hear you perfectly, and I can see you.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening. I am Daniel Pearson. I'm an environmental protection specialist for the U.S. Department of Energy at the Hanford site. And tonight I'll be presenting information regarding the modifications to the Dangerous Waste Permit Inspection Plan. And if you could go right to the next slide, please. Thanks. So in particular, tonight's agenda will focus on our plan modifications to the Waste Treatment and Immobilization Plant that we call WTP, the Dangerous Waste Permit, Chapter 6A, which is the inspection plan for the WTP. I'll be talking about the first 4 items listed there on the agenda, and then we'll open it up to any questions you might have. Next slide, please. So the Department of Energy's Hanford site manages 56 million gallons of waste stored in underground tanks. That waste resulted from more than 4 decades of past plutonium production. And the management of that waste includes the treatment, the storage, and the disposal activities. So the DOE is gearing up to treat the low activity tank waste by 2023 through our direct feed low activity waste program. Direct feed low activity waste. We call that DF-LAW. Several Hanford facilities and systems are being constructed and upgraded to achieve that goal. And some of those activities require changes to the WTP Dangerous Waste Permit. So tonight's meeting will focus on those proposed changes. Next slide, please. The direct feed low activity waste, the DF-LAW configuration, allows for the operation of the WTP low activity waste vitrification facility and the analytical lab. In that DF-LAW configuration, the pre-treated low activity waste is fed directly from the Hanford tank farms to the LAW vitrification facility. The effluent management facility that we call EMF will manage and treat the liquid effluent from the LAW vitrification facility radioactive liquid waste disposal system, and the lab RLD system, and manage the effluent from the LAW secondary off-gas vessel vent process system. Next slide, please. So here's a visual, in case you're not familiar with the area, state of Washington, with an expanded view of the Hanford site. And sort of in the middle of that Hanford site expansion, you see a white rectangle with the letters WTP. That's marking the approximate location of the 200 East area where the WTP is located. Next slide, please. And this is a closer look from overhead of the WTP area, with the law facility to the right, the lab in the center, and the EMF to the left. Next slide, please. To give a little background, the Federal Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, or RCRA, the federal RCRA, the Hanford Dangerous Waste Permit, those govern the dangerous waste treatment, storage, and disposal at the Hanford site. And the Washington State Department of Ecology is our regulator on that permit. And they have issued the current Hanford site-wide permit, which is revision 8C, and that governs the hazardous tank waste treatment, storage, and disposal. The permittees are DOE and Bechtel National Incorporated, and we are proposing this Class 2 permit modification to the WTP Operating Unit Group 10, Chapter 6A inspection plan. Next slide, please. In the RCRA Dangerous Waste Permit, the section for the WTP, Chapter 6A is our inspection plan. It describes the structures, the systems, the components that need recurring inspections in order to detect and prevent malfunctions, deteriorations, or discharges at the WTP. And this includes the where, the how often, and the reports necessary to be maintained on those inspections. Next slide, please. So we're proposing to update the inspection methods for routinely non-accessible areas. And we're proposing to add the melter pour cave and the ILAW container buffer storage and rework areas to the list of routinely non-accessible areas. What does that mean? Next slide. Why would we want to add locations to the routinely non-accessible list? We use a principle we call ALARA, which stands for as low as reasonably achievable, and that's in respect to occupational exposure to radiation and radioactive materials. So we use that to help us determine locations where there are higher risks for our employees. Also, confined spaces add risks to employees who have to enter those areas. Next slide, please. The existing inspection tables in Chapter 6A give us several inspection methods, which were previously written. And now that we have the as-built conditions, we can refine those inspection methods to address safety and occupational health considerations for our employees. And it's really important to note that every proposal that's being made tonight, and that's being made in this permit change request, is in compliance with the Dangerous Waste Permit and the Washington Administrative Code. Next slide, please. Here's a quick look at 3 different inspection methods. The physical inspection method is one where a person has to physically be in the area at the location where the inspection is being conducted. A remote inspection is one where the person can inspect that area or that device or whatever it is that's under inspection, but they don't have to physically be there. They can do it through closed circuit TV or observation windows or control panels or some other process that allows them to assess the area without physically being there. Finally, there's the functional method, and that allows us to operate or test items or systems to determine if they're operating correctly to the parameters that we expect. Next slide, please. So in general, the updates that we're talking about pertain to refining inspection methods where we think it's necessary. We want to revise the physical inspections for those routinely non-accessible areas. We want to revise the closed circuit TV inspection methods where we simply don't have those cameras. And we want to be able to specify control panels and control room system monitoring where that would be necessary. Finally, we want to be able to specify the physical inspection method where it does make sense to do that. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide and the next two are really here to show you that there is an objective criteria that we use. This isn't just something that we make up on the fly. It's an objective standard. So once we have those as-built drawings for our plant areas, our teams were able to study all the areas of the WTP and look for locations where the objective standards indicated higher levels of hazards for in-person occupancy. And again, we use the ALARA principle and the information on the next two slides. Next slide, please. So here's a fairly simple, straightforward chart, if you will. At the top, down to the bottom, from the lowest level of radiation, maximum equivalent dose rates to the highest. And then if you notice to the right, that whole section talks about the types of access control. This is what I mean by it's an objective standard. When our engineers look at an area under observation and they determine what we can expect for the maximum equivalent dose rate for a person to be in that area, then we just find where it falls on the chart and look and see what type of access control we need to implement. It's an objective standard. Next slide, please. Very similar chart. This has surface contamination limits. Same thing, top to bottom, lower level to higher level. And this gives us a description of what sort of actions we need to take to keep surface contamination from migrating out of areas. So again, objective standards are in use. Next slide, please. So the charts and that ALARA principle, those helped our teams determine that the melter pour cave area and the ILOC container buffer storage and rework areas needed to be classified such that updating the inspection methods for those areas was necessary. We're proposing to reclassify them for remote inspections so our employees won't need to routinely access those areas. Next slide, please. So the proposed changes to the inspection methods reflect what we think are the appropriate strategies for protecting worker health and safety, while at the same time assuring the system function and integrity that we want. And these modifications to the inspection methods, again, are within the scope of the dangerous waste permit in the Washington Administrative Code. And finally, the inspection frequencies don't change. What we're proposing are changes to the methods of the inspections. Next slide, please. This one we'll leave up just for a minute in case you want to write this information down or take a picture of it with your phone. So again, this is a Class 2 permit mod, and as such, the Washington Administrative Code tells us that we need to open up a 60-day public comment period. As has been mentioned, this has been extended through December 17th. So we're in the public comment period now. So you can submit them by mail or electronically, which is the preferred way. And you can go to that website and you can find all the information you need. You can actually find the entire proposal if you want to read through every line of it. It's all right there. So this concludes my presentation, and I'll turn it back over to our moderators to field any of the questions that you might have tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate that, and I actually understood it. So nice job on that. I need to apologize. I made a speaking error at the top of the meeting and said this comment period would conclude December 4th. We actually extended that to December 17th. With the holidays coming on, we can always use a little extra time. And of course, we want to hear your comments. I also notice in the chat and the people joining us that we have several representatives from the Washington State Department of Ecology who will be involved with the permit. So with all of that acknowledgement, Colleen, let's just get right to the questions. Who's in the chat, please?
Hi, thanks, Deanna. We don't have any questions in the chat right now.
Well, I see at least a few people joining us, and we want to make good use of this meeting. So is there anyone on the phone who would like to ask a question? Hit *6 to unmute, and we would love to hear from you. Again, anyone on the phone? *6 to unmute.
It looks like Dan Solitz has his hand raised.
Oh,
so Dan,
hi. Welcome.
So Dan, if you're able to unmute.
I hope so. If you can hear me, I'm unmuted.
Yep. We
Yes.
can hear you.
All right. Well, this is very, very interesting. I'm kind of curious as to whether or not this process is like carved in stone, and if you have the opportunity to go to a more how shall I say, personalized inspection method because of operational conditions have changed. There's downtime, or you've lost electricity, or something like that, where you can actually get in a safe manner and do these inspections in person by eyeball rather than remote control or with process equipment. Or is there enough flexibility in this process that can happen? I mean, there's hands-on and then there's remote, and hands-on is usually the most reliable.
I'd like to take the first stab at that. It's a good question, Dan. It's Dan, right?
Yes.
I think I got that right. It's easy enough. It's my name. Hey, I can remember that one.
Okay.
Actually, what you discussed is still in the inspection plan. So exactly what you just talked about. When we have periods of downtime where we will send people into these areas, we'll also take advantage of those times to do some of the in-person inspections. But remember that the inspections, we're not changing the frequency. So those frequencies may fall on periods that we don't want to send somebody into a certain area because of the higher level of radiation risk that they may incur by being there. So that's why we're proposing in those cases to make them remote or some other method of inspection other than sending somebody in when we probably shouldn't. But you're right. It is a good idea when we can. When it's like when your car is in the shop for a new carburetor, you might as well change the brakes at the same time. So same principle applies. So I hope that answers your question. And if anybody else from BNI or DOE has a better answer or something you want to add to that, please step in.
No, that's a good answer. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's reassuring. I mean, I know you guys aren't lockstep, but it's still nice to hear it.
All right. Thank you, Dan. I see another hand raised. Colleen?
Yes, our next question, it looks like Maya Burke has a question. Maya, are you able to unmute?
Hi, yeah. I have a question about a specific portion of the permit modification. On page 14, it talks about instrument calibration, and it reads, certain equipment calibration might not be possible when law is operating. If the law campaign prohibits instrumentation calibration, these activities will be scheduled during outages to avoid interference with operating activities. And so I'm curious if there's an instrument that is used daily to monitor a certain area and that turns out that it needs calibrating, will it wait until there's an outage, and how long will that wait have to be, or is there kind of a backup plan or any kind of explanation for that?
That's a great question, and unlike you, I don't have the actual mod right in front of me, but I know what you're talking about, and I'm afraid I can't answer that question. It's a great question, and I'm writing down the particulars for it. If I'm going to ask perhaps Sheila if she has a better answer than I have, which is right now no answer.
Sure. Hi, Dan. I don't have it open in front of me either. What I can say from our discussions and development of the modification is that to meet our frequencies, particularly if the instrumentation is intrinsic to the inspection, there will be I can't speak to the operational specifics at this time, it's all in planning, but there will be methods put in place to assure that we meet our inspection frequency requirements. And that would be on a case by case, depending upon which instrumentation or which inspection attribute we're talking about. I hope that helps.
Thanks, Sheila. Help me. Maya, does that help?
Yeah, I think so. It just, I guess it would be nice to have more of a specific, like that outlined more specifically in the permit mod, maybe. Just kind of yeah, more explanation for everyone.
Maya, if you wouldn't mind,
I'll
would you
make
please
sure of that,
repeat
too.
which section you were looking at so that we can go back and take a look at that? Because we do appreciate your comment.
Yeah, let me look it up. I know though from my notes it's on page 14, but I can look up the specific section right now. Thank you.
I do not see any other raised hands or questions in the chat at this point, Dana. She's on mute. And I think you're on mute, Dana.
So tricky. We're always trying to be muted so we don't have feedback and then no one can hear anyone. Is there anyone on the phone who would like to ask a question? *6 to unmute, please. Anyone else on the Teams meeting? We have the evening free. We're here. We'd like to answer your questions. There's no bad question. All right, well, we will remain here for the time being while Ms. Burke is searching for the site. And again, I'd like to point out that this is such a wonderful opportunity here to see some public involvement in action. And it just shows how one good question or one good comment can help the agencies deliver a better product. And we appreciate that very sincerely. So do you have the citation ready, Maya?
Oh, I was going to say, Dan, it looked like there was another question from Dan Solitz, when you want to circle back to that.
Oh, fantastic. Yes, I'm not sure. Yes, Dan, please proceed.
Okay, well, it's kind of a long-term question. Eventually, the melter will have to be replaced. Is there going to be a formal process to go in there and evaluate its performance and also the performance of the monitoring that you're doing, particularly the remote monitoring that you're doing as you pull that old melter out? Take a look at the throat and whatever else you can look at.
Sorry, I couldn't get my mute off. Dan,
Okay, I thought I was.
a question on. No, I heard you. That's really a question beyond the scope of what we're talking about tonight. It's probably a good question, but we really need to stick to the 6A inspection plan changes. Rather than talk
That's
about
fine. There's plenty of time. Hopefully, it'll be more than 5 years. Do you guys know anything about the operation itself of the melter? I was kind of curious as to how they drain that thing down when they're going to pull it. I understand it's going down to 2.5 feet, and then they pull it out. Do you know how that is accomplished?
Sorry, Dan, that's beyond the scope of what we're talking about tonight. And really, I don't have a whole lot of information myself on the specifics of how we're going to manage the melters at the end of their service life. But they're good. Hang on to them. We're just.
Oh, I will. Thank you.
Right. Sure.
Hey, this is Dwayne Carter, DOE Environmental. So how we're going to manage the melters is we're going to take them over to the Integrated Disposal Facility, IDF, and we're building treatment and storage pads. And so what we'll do at the end is basically void fill. So that's a landfill terminology before we put it in the IDF. And if is any inspection or anything that needs to be done to the melters, we'll check it out on the treatment or storage pads at the IDF.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Dwayne. And if I could real quick, Maya, what you have in front of you, maybe I do have now the plan in front of me, but our numbering may be different on the pages. Can you tell me what section that was in that you were referring to, just so I can find it?
Hi, yeah, I'm having a difficult time finding it, and I looked at this I looked at it when maybe a month ago or so when it first came out, and has the document changed since you first released it at all?
Dan, this is Sheila. I found the verbiage. It's in 6A.2.1.7, the instrument calibration section, which is actually not part of the modification as far as being modified at this time. However, I can say that in addressing the question, this is one that we would have to go back and look at for any sort of specificity in addressing.
Thanks, Sheila.
Is there anyone else who has a question, either on Microsoft Teams or on the phone? *6 to unmute.
Hi, Dana. We do have a question from Liz Matson.
Oh,
So,
I see.
Liz, if you're able to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
Thanks. I was just wondering, and I don't know who is on from ecology, or if there's a way to just share if ecology has any concerns or questions about the permit modification for inspections. Sometimes that's helpful context, if that's possible to hear.
Hi, this is Joanna. I'm with Ecology, and our team has reviewed the modification, and we don't have any concerns at this time.
Okay, so we'll go back and check again. Are there any questions in the chat? Any questions from people on the phone? We would love to help you better understand or answer your questions in any way. Well, with no further questions, Daniel, a compliment to you for preparing and delivering a nice presentation, and thank you to the support to Ecology, and especially thank you for those of you who took the time to come and participate and help us improve. We appreciate it very, very much. Let's do one more check for questions before we say goodnight. Colleen, are there any other questions in the chat?
Thanks for checking, Dana. Nope, there are no other questions in the chat.
Okay, and then let's check for anyone who's on the phone only. Hit *6 to unmute, and we would love to hear your question before we conclude. *6 to unmute. Well, thank you to everyone for coming. We sincerely appreciate it. On behalf of DOE, we thank you. In the chat, oh, I thought I heard a voice.
Oh, I was just going to say, Dana, we do have a link for an evaluation in the chat.
Oh, fantastic. Yes, we would love to do better, improve if we can. There's a link for the evaluation in the chat. And again, as we mentioned earlier, just go to hanford.gov anytime. Look to the events calendar. You just scroll down to the bottom right-hand corner. You can find tonight's meeting. You'll find tonight's meeting materials, all the details about how you can submit your comments and this evaluation so we can improve there. Again, this comment period has been extended to December 17th to make sure everyone has adequate time to submit their comments, and we look forward to hearing from you. So one last check. Are there any questions before we conclude? We have the time and are happy to answer. Okay, well, thank you everyone, and we wish you a very pleasant evening.
Nice presentation, Dan.
Thank you.